Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. That's right, Alvin Kamara drinks for free here at the Happy Hour bar. That sound at the top of the show was him running wild against the Dallas Cowboys.
He can have 44 drinks, one for every fantasy point he scored. Absolutely destroyed me in a league. You know,
I like to hear that.
I'm sure you do. But you know, that's one of the fun things is like I would much rather get blown out than lose like on a hard bite, like lose by 0.2 of a point, lose on a kneel down, whatever. Like there's one league where I just got, the guy that I was playing just he had Kamara, he had like everyone that went off yesterday. He had Kyler, he drafted ahead of me and he got Kyler, Anyway, like he had just every person that went off. I lost by like 75 points. It was ridiculous. It was great.
Yeah, better to go down.
Well, no, I'm just like, at least like you looked at it like at halftime, you're like, I'm done. Okay, like whatever.
It was kind of a Sunday where we felt like we turned back the clock. Alvin Kamara, Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry.
Oh, yeah.
There were yards this Sunday. There were no yards the previous Sunday.
Yes.
Now we had yards again.
Some scoring.
I love yards. Big yards guy.
Your Saints.
Yeah.
My Saints.
Yeah.
Who dat? Who are you? Who are you?
Yeah.
What is your name? Who dat? The Saints.
Oh, yeah.
They deliver.
Yeah. This guy had Connor, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DK Metcalf, and Kamara, obviously. Just, I do have Kyler in this league anyway. But whatever, the point is, it's good for that guy. And good for Alvin Kamara, good for everyone. We talked about this all preseason about like cheap volume at running back and that there were guys there in those middle rounds that like no one was going to – James Conner and Alvin Kamara were two of the poster boys, if you will, for that kind of take, which was, hey, you know what? I get it. They're not sexy names. They've been around for a while. No one's going to go, ooh, at your draft. But, like, you're going to look up. Brian Robinson was another guy that we talked about a lot in the preseason. Just these cheap volume guys, like just going in the middle rounds that are veterans or not on the sexy teams, but they're going to get a ton of work. And that's what happened in week 2 is we saw all three of those guys have monster days. We'll get into all of that. None of them as big as Alvin Kamara, the best fantasy day of the season so far.
Yeah, we got to hear from Kamara after the game on him kind of shutting out a lot of people doubting him going into this year.
It's no surprise to me, I think, and like I said, I don't look at a lot of news and stuff like that. I usually got to receive news from my brother or something, or my mom mad if somebody said something about me, but I feel good, I said, and I mean this, like, I feel like I can play until I feel like I don't want to play, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. It's fun. I feel like we're winning. I like being here. I like being around my teammates. I love the city. We just keep going. I'm 29. I guess I'm old in football years, but I don't feel old.
Alvin Kamara obviously top the board here. I don't think anyone's catching him even on Monday Night Football. 44 points as you see him number 1 amongst running backs in week 2, Matthew.
I mean, he was ridiculous. So we saw some, listen, we expected James Cook. We expected Breece Hall, Devon Achane, Braylon Allen. But anyway, let's talk about Kamara here for a second. And the Saints are just an unbelievable story through. Like, it's one thing to drop a 40 burger on the Panthers. It's another to go into Dallas and do it on the Cowboys. And they were absolutely ridiculous. I think they scored on their first 15 drives of the season so far. Like, the fourth quarter of this game was the first punt of the year for the New Orleans Saints, and Alvin Kamara is reaping the benefits of it. We're seeing some Jamal Williams as well, but only like in junk time.
They've had the ball so much.
They've had the ball so much. It's like I talked about this with Jason Garrett on the FNIA pod. We do a podcast, Football Night in America, and Maria Taylor, Mike Florio, Devin McCourty, Jason Garrett, and myself. And we talked about the Saints, and one of the things I've talked about how Clint Kubiak has just used all sorts of motion and play action, just kind of brought the Saints offense into the modern era. And what Garrett talked about, which Coach Garrett talked about, which is so true, which is just that basically every play sort of looks the same, and then they're doing it like, as opposed to, oh, this is obviously a run play, this is obviously a pass play. Like it's just a cohesive offense that just kind of looks like a modern offense should, and credit to Clint Kubiak. And by the way, not only credit to Clint Kubiak, Connor Rogers, but credit to Jay Croucher, because no one thought the Saints would win except this guy, and we brought receipts.
what if the New Orleans Saints are just good? Because last year, they had a top 5 defense in the NFL, and now this year, the whole knock on the Saints was that their offensive line might be the worst in football. If they have a good offensive line, then you would have Derek Carr in a clean pocket, throwing to Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, Denny's man, Jawan Johnson. There are pieces there, and I think there are reasons to believe that the offensive line might actually be better than we think. The mainstream media, they don't want you to. The New Orleans Saints are good this year. They're actually good. Defense is good. Offensive line, much better than expected. I think they keep Micah Parsons and co at bay, and they, you know what? They beat the Dallas Cowboys. That's right. Cover 6.5, and they beat them outright.
I like that.
All right.
Nicely done, Jay.
Thank you, Connor.
Your team of 2024, at least for now.
For now, yes. I've hitched myself to various bandwagons over the duration of the show.
Goodbye,
I believe
New York
back
Giants.
in 2022, I was a Jags man. Now, I can't remember what it was last year. It might have been the Falcons.
It was the Giants, I feel like.
It was the Giants. But you know what? Yes, and the Jaguars for a little bit before we bailed. But you know what? This is God rewarding you for your unyielding dedication to Michael Thomas and his lack of knees.
Yes.
They're like, you know what? When everyone else bailed, Jay Croucher was still there. So
exactly.
Who dat, Jay
yes.
Croucher?
Who dat indeed. And who is Michael Thomas? Not a New Orleans Saints player anymore. But look, I think this team, it's a testament to how much coaching actually matters.
Right.
Because the personnel is the same. Like, it's the same guys. They bring in Fuaga at left tackle, but for the most part, these guys were all there last year, and it's just that the scheme is different. To your point, Matthew, and you mentioned this earlier, Connor, that the Saints use more motion than anyone. And you look at Kamara, you look at his plays. Hey, Alvin Kamara is amazing. There is so much more space for him than there was last year, and he's taking advantage of it. He's still the slipperiest runner in the NFL. And to me, the crazy thing about Kamara, and he mentioned it in the soundbite, he's 29 years old. Like, it feels like he's 34. He's been around forever, but he's still relatively young, and I think that this is somewhat sustainable in terms of, look, I don't think they're going to be scoring every drive and never punting, but there are things in this offense where if this offensive line stays playing as well as it does, then I think that all of these guys, Kamara, Carr, Shaheed, Olave, they can all provide a lot of value.
Through 2 games, he's averaging 21 touches, 145 scrimmage yards per game, over a 20% target share in terms of keeping the floor high. Again, he's a true 3-down back. Their upcoming schedule, Eagles, at Falcons, at Chiefs, against Tampa Bay. So not an easy run coming up here, but on the other hand, they just went into Dallas. Like, to your point, as long as that offensive line holds up, like, I think if you were redrafting today, Kamara's easily a top 10 running back. There's no question about that. He's possibly like end of the first round, middle of the second. Derek Carr is suddenly on the, very much on the mid-tier QB2 radar and moving up as well. I mean, 21.8 fantasy points per game. Through 2 weeks, Derek Carr leads all quarterbacks in passer rating, yards per attempt, and, oh, by the way, touchdown rate. And we haven't really seen it develop in a big way for Chris Olave yet. We haven't seen the big game from him. But your guy, Rashid Shaheed, had a 27% target share in week 2, 23% target share this season. That's a team high. He's had at least a 50-yard receiving touchdown in both games. Like, I feel the need for Rashid Shaheed.
Right, because last year it was always us like, when is it going to be a Rashid Shaheed week, which is the most frustrating thing in fantasy. We talked about it with Gabe Davis for a long time. This year, he's legitimately in the offense. He's on the field, he's running a lot of routes, and they're actually pushing the ball down the field, which is opening up everything else right now, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a well-oiled machine, and it's running on all cylinders. With Kamara, like, how, you say top 10 running back, like how high can it get for Kamara? Because I think if you're drafting him today or trade value, like still Brees, Bijan, Saquon, those 3 I think are probably your top 3. But after that, like is there anyone else decisively ahead of Alvin Kamara?
Decisively,
Achane?
no. I mean, Achane and Taylor are right there off the top of my head. The 49ers running back, if you were somehow able to get Jordan Mason and Christian McCaffrey, like if you were just like starting running back for San Francisco is there.
But he has a case to be RB4. Like he
does.
Case.
He's in that in the 4 to 8 range. Yep. You'd rather him than Derrick Henry. You'd rather him than Pacheco, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Like
Joe Mixon,
you'd rather him
injury as well.
Yeah, I mean, right. So like I think you'd rather him than Kyron Williams.
James Cook is in that mix.
Yeah, I mean, but like he's right there is the argument, and it's not like it's out of the blue because we didn't expect this from the Saints offense. But it's not like Alvin Kamara hasn't been fantasy elite before. He has been. He's constantly, throughout his career, he's always been one of the best running backs in fantasy. It's been a rough go the last couple of years where he hasn't. But last year he provided a lot of value, and people slept on him. And this year, So, by the way, he was on the preseason love list, so you have no one to blame but yourself. He legit was. And so, kudos to the Saints. Who dat? It's also, for fantasy purposes, what we love. It is also a fairly narrow distribution here. Some offenses, there's so many guys here, but it's Kamara, it's Shaheed, it's Chris Olave. We can talk about the tight ends for a second. Taysom Hill got banged up in this game. The tight ends are a little bit by committee, but otherwise, it's basically those three guys, which is great for fantasy football.
And the touchdown equity goes to Kamara, which that's the biggest win of all of this, right? Olave's not a big red zone presence. Shaheed, he has to catch a bomb to score, which he could do once a game. Taysom Hill's dealing with a chest injury. He did make the flight home, but he's going to have a lot more imaging done this week. He's a guy that could steal touches in the red zone. Now he's hurt.
The concern was always Jamal Williams was going to be like a goal line guy.
Kendre Miller, once upon a time, that's gone.
But Kamara's been the guy. He is the guy when they get down there.
Yeah, and why would you, if you're the Saints, why would you switch any of this up? The other thing is I'll just say this about Derek Carr, because I just remember talking about when Derek Carr went to the Saints in the first place. And one of the big reactions was, this is going to be great for Chris Olave because, Derek Carr has his flaws as a quarterback, but one thing he's really good at is the deep ball. He was good with the Raiders doing that. He's always been a good deep ball thrower, and for whatever reason, the Saints just didn't do that enough last year. And again, we talked about that Shaheed played special teams, so he wasn't a full-time player, and they still had to give snaps to Michael Thomas, and he wasn't going deep, and and whatever. They just couldn't get the ball to Olave enough last year. But it seems like, again, with his use of motion and his use of play action, they're not afraid to let Carr chuck it deep. And I don't think this is an accident. I think this is within Derek Carr's skill set.
Yep, I think so too. Just the balance of the offense is what stands out to me.
I'm going to call my next Saints shot. They're 15-1 on DraftKings to win the NFC. They're double the price of the Cowboys. You see them play the Cowboys? Why are they worse than the Cowboys? Why are they 3 times the price of a Lions team that doesn't look good at all so far? The NFC's wide open. Niners did not look great against Minnesota. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Saints win this division. They get a top 2 seed. You're going to go into New Orleans. Saints.
Super Bowl is in
New Orleans. We will be there. I'll be wearing my Chris Olave jersey at the Super Bowl come early February.
There you go. By the way, they are. They're off to a hot start. And last time they were off to this kind of start was 2009 when they won the Super Bowl. So who knows? Might be the Saints' year. Team of destiny.
15-1 NFC.
One last thing before we put a bow on this game. Just the Cowboys' offense. It just doesn't look in sync at all out of the gate this year, Matthew. At all.
Yeah. Look. And by the way. You talk about a big game. Next week, they are home to the Ravens. You want to talk, you've got a 1-1 Cowboys team against a desperate 0-2 Ravens team. Man, oh man, one of those teams is either 0-3 or the Cowboys are 1-2 and just going, what do we do? I thought the Cowboys offense looked really one-dimensional. They didn't have Jake Ferguson for this game, and they missed him for half last game, but they're getting nothing out of their run game. Dak Prescott doesn't run. So Dak Prescott has become a kind of this one-dimensional quarterback that really all he has is CeeDee Lamb. Jalen Tolbert made an unbelievable catch, and Brandon Cooks has his moments. But honestly, this is, I would be nervous if I had Dak Prescott as my only fantasy quarterback in a league this year. I do not think he's a top 12 fantasy quarterback this year.
Yep, I agree.
Let's move over to that upset, which was the Raiders beating Baltimore at Baltimore, and a lot of this was on the back of not only Devontae Adams, who had a flashback game, caught 9 passes for 110 yards, a touchdown. Brock Bowers, Matthew, caught all 9 targets for 98 yards.
So I'm just going to say this. As I sit here and I brag to you about how Alvin Kamara was on the preseason love list, and so it was Joe Mixon and Pacheco, my ride or die Kyler Murray looking great. The preseason love list really looking good at this point. But I got to tell you, Brock Bowers was on the hate list, and I would like that one back. That was a huge mistake by me. That was a massive mistake. I was just he's going to the Raiders, bad quarterback situation, splitting time with Mayer. How many targets? Got hurt in August. I don't see it with Brock Bowers this year. I get the talent, but I just think the situation, you know what, Connor? Sometimes elite talent just wins out. I would like a mulligan on that. Mea culpa. That was just an awful freaking call because this guy is just a monster.
Yeah, it turns out one of the best tight end prospects the last 20 years is now going to be one of the probably better pass catching tight ends in the NFL.
I screwed you guys on that one. I'm sorry.
Happens.
Well, I think the concern was health, right?
Right. That's where I started to get because he was hurt. He was hurt last year.
It was team situation. We thought they were going to be run heavy. I just, just all the things that just. I didn't love him at ADP, and turns out I was wrong. Where he was going at ADP was perfectly fine.
That's the shocking thing about the Raiders. It's not so much what's actually happening in terms of stat accumulation. They're just throwing the ball a ton. Yeah. This is airing it out. We can't imagine. Everyone's like, oh, Antonio Pierce, old school, ground and pound, Zamir White. They're just throwing it all the time. And so Bowers and Devontae Adams are really benefiting.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you have to throw when things aren't
Zamir
working.
White's terrible,
That's
by the way. I mean,
this is the thing. They can't really effectively run the ball the way they want to. So Gardner Minshew, let it rip.
Certainly not against Baltimore. By the way, I got to give. I love to give Jay crap. I really do. But man, oh man, fantasy football pregame Sunday morning. If you guys aren't watching, we had a really good day there too. And this man, Jay Croucher, made you money if you were listening to him as well. Not only did he call the Saints upset, he called the Raiders upset. You said that. You said they're going into Baltimore. I think they win this game.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that I actually said it in the first hour of the show, and then I don't think anyone was listening because they thought it was too ridiculous. And then an hour later, Lawrence Jackson just popped into his head an hour delayed. Like, did you say before that you think the Raiders are going to beat the Ravens? Like, yeah, I think the Raiders are going to win. The Ravens' defense looked terrible against the Chiefs. Ravens have a lot of questions, and we'll get into some of that. But this Raiders team, here's the thing with the Raiders, right? Gardner Minshew, everyone thinks of him as like the quintessential backup quarterback. Like the Merriam-Webster definition of a backup quarterback is Gardner Minshew. And the idea of a backup quarterback is they're like a game manager safe zone. Gardner Minshew is a madman. He just heaves it up, and he has huge he's very high variance where he makes all the throws and then he just gets randomly strip sacked when he's been in the pocket for 6 seconds. He's got no idea what's going on. But he can get the ball to these guys, and that's the main thing. So I think this is perhaps a more fantasy-friendly environment than you might think, just given the overall level of talent of the quarterback.
Brock Bowers now has 30 fantasy points in the season. He's the second best tight end in fantasy through 2 weeks. Now, a lot of the big-name guys just have really disappointed there as well, but he's had at least 8 targets and 6 receptions in each game. 25% target share, which is second highest on the team. Now, weirdly, he doesn't have any red zone targets this year. I have to believe that's going to change, right? He's too much of a weapon here. He's caught 15 of his 17 targets. He has been all that in a bag of Raider chips. I will tell you that I think, again, if you were for trade value, if you were redrafting today, I would argue he's in that. We talked about that sort of that elite top 5 tier of LaPorta, Kelce, McBride, Andrews, and Dalton Kincaid. I think he's right there in that tier. I mean, redrafting again today, I don't know that you'd take all 5 of those in that order. It's been a slow start for each one of those 5 guys. But he's right there with, I would argue he's right there with Kittle. Kittle had a big game this week, but there's some variance there. Kyle Pitts, we'll see what he does tonight. But I don't know. Yeah, I think Bowers is a mid-tier tight end one from this moment forward. Again, I'm raising my hand and saying what a terrible effing call that was by me, but all in.
I'm not sure there's a tight end you definitively want over Brock Bowers. you could say degrees maybe you prefer LaPorta or McBride because you still have to regress a little bit to preseason expectations this early in, but Brock Bowers is right there.
It's been brutal for the
right
top
there.
guys.
Yeah, we'll get to the Chiefs as well. Kelce had some bad luck in this game. We'll get there. But anyway, he's right there in that. He's right there in that mix. By the way, coming up next for the Red Hot Raiders, Carolina Panthers. They host Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. Then they host the Browns. At Denver, home to Pittsburgh. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but
there's pretty good overall.
I was just going to say, there's a decent chance at the end of this they're 3-3 or they're 4-2, and they're right there in the mix.
Yep.
The good news for Baltimore, specifically on the fantasy side of things, guys, the volume was there from the guys that you expected from Jay. Derrick Henry gets 18 carries, Zay Flowers gets 11 targets, and they both had productive days.
Yeah, Zay Flowers still just continuing the trend on from the back half of last year where he's clearly Lamar Jackson's number 1 guy. With Derrick Henry, I think a lot was made of the fact that, he didn't play a massive amount of snaps against the Chiefs and he was coming off the field on 3rd down. He's still getting all the carries. That's the main thing, right? Is he's getting the carries, he's getting a little bit of passing work. He's getting a couple of balls thrown to him each game. So I think with Henry, again, it's a little bit weird because he's not on the field all the time, but he gets such heavy usage when he is, and he's going to have such touchdown equity.
That's the thing. He scored this week. He scored last week. We've talked when they get in close, it's always going to be him. They actually direct snap the ball to him and let him and the entire team push it in. Ravens, by the way, this is if you're a Baltimore fan, just again, we talked about that. They're on the road at Dallas. They're 0-2. They're on the road at Dallas. Then they're home to Buffalo. Then they've got to go to Cincinnati, and you expect T. Higgins is back and Burrow. Like, that ain't easy. Then they're home to my Commanders, and they'll kill them. But, like, there's a chance, like, they're 1-4. You know, at that point, I don't know. It's dicey. But, yes, Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry. And the other last thing I'll mention here quickly is Mark Andrews. Everyone was expecting, Isaiah Likely. Is there a changing of the guard? No. Like, again, it was not a great game for the Ravens offense, but there was a return to the pecking order of the tight ends. Mike Andrews looked more like Mark Andrews in this one.
Yep.
He'll be fine.
In one of the surprises of the week, Arizona blows out the Rams. This game was over at halftime. Something that wasn't a surprise to Matthew, despite the internet worrying about GPS times and max speed and everything along with that, was Marvin Harrison having a big breakout. Take a listen.
He's an elite talent, and believe me, it's kind of a squeaky wheel narrative. Kyler Murray knows if he's going to go anywhere this year, if the Cardinals are going to go anywhere, Marvin Harrison Jr. needs to be involved. By the way, I think it's a good matchup as well. Rams banged up in the secondary. Give me Marvin Harrison Jr. over 70 yards, and he stops everyone talking about, what's going on with the Cardinals' #1 pick.
Always nice when you get that one in the first quarter, right?
Sure, 1,000% with this play. This play was like, boom, done. Yeah.
Turns out the best player in the draft is still pretty good.
Yeah.
I think this calmed a lot of nerves around Marvin Harrison. Maybe Kyler Murray was just trolling us at the end of the day.
Maybe so. And by the way, ride or die. Let's go. Kyler Murray.
He looked great. Best game of his career.
4 for 130 and 2 touchdowns on 8 targets for Marvin Harrison Jr. Look at this from Next Gen Stats. This is his 23-yard touchdown pass to Marvin Harrison Jr. had a completion probability of just 13.7%, the most improbable touchdown of the 2024 season so far. Harrison had just 0.7 yards of separation and was 0.7 yards from the sideline when the pass arrived. That's courtesy of Next Gen Stats. But that goes to what we were talking about, Connor, about the fact this is not a guy that needs a ton of separation.
No, he's 6'3". He's got long arms. He's got great tracking. I mean, he catches everything with great body control. This is what made him such a special player, and why a lot of people, including myself, thought coming out of the draft is comparable was A.J. Green. Yep. A.J. Green did not run a 4.3. A.J. Green did not run a 4.4. But when you have that kind of body control and that kind of size, and that you're that smart of a player, you can make plays even when you're covered. And we saw that with Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yep, and I think the key thing is physically. So the big thing out of last week was that stat that we shared from Seth Walder and Next Gen Stats that his max speed was only 16.7 miles per hour, which was incredibly low among just wide receivers in general the past 2 years. On that second touchdown, he reached a max speed of over 20 miles per hour. Also, back in Ohio State, he had a max speed that was higher than Malik Nabers' max speed that was reached. So it's not like he's slow. I don't know what happened in Buffalo. Maybe he just doesn't like running in the wind. I don't like running into wind either, so maybe it just slowed him down. I have no idea what happened, but it seems like he's fine physically.
There's one play in that game that we didn't show in the clip where it was another scramble by Kyler Murray. It was kind of a broken play, and Harrison was doing a comeback route, and then he noticed he was scrambling, and so Harrison just took off the other way, raises his arm, and then Murray throws it over, and it was like a 35, 40-yard reception. It was just a really nice play showing the chemistry between them, showing them both on an off-schedule play. Wheels up. Oh, by the way, the Cardinals home versus Detroit. That's not a defense that has looked. Tampa Bay just lit them up. Then home to my Commanders. Oh man, Kyler Murray, #1 player in fantasy after my Commanders. Then they're at San Francisco. Okay, figure the 49ers get it, and then they're at Green Bay. But 49ers defense suddenly looks, Sam Darnold just carved them up. Anyway, I think so far through 2 weeks, very good, feeling very good about this year's ride or die as well. He's had at least 55 rushing yards in both games. This is his best fantasy game since week 13 of 2021. He was the #1 quarterback in fantasy. And then, of course, you see it right there. Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, just like we all drew it up.
This list is just hilarious. The week 2 fantasy leaders at quarterback, an all-star list. Like you said, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Deshaun Watson at 9, Aaron Rodgers, who didn't even throw that much, #10 on the list. And the gap between Kyler Murray at #1, 28.5 points, to #2, Derek Carr, who had a great game, 21.8 points. That's a massive gap. If you invested in this Arizona offense, you're feeling really good about things right now, because it's not just the Marv and Kyler show week 2, But James Conner, the volume we always talk about, Jay, 21 carries, 122 yards, a touchdown. He also catches a pass. I mean, these three guys in this offense, there's really big things ahead for them in this stretch.
Definitely. And I think one of the undercovered things of last season was just how insanely efficient Arizona's run offense was, and James Conner was a big part of that. It's a cheat code having Kyler Murray in the backfield to take another man out of the box. So James Conner, he is one of the very few workhorse backs in the NFL. There just aren't that many guys who you can consistently rely on to get over 80% of the carries, and James Conner is one of those.
He's averaging 20 touches a game so far in this season. And by the way, for the idea that he's just kind of this grinder that's getting tons of volume, he had 4 different rushes of 10 or more yards in week 2. Again, having Kyler back there opens up some running lanes. But James Conner locked in as kind of a low-end RB1, high-end RB2. Trey McBride had a nice game as well. He got lucky because there was a fumble and he basically fell on a ball in the end zone.
All counts
but
the same.
it all still counts the same. But he was at least getting targeted and certainly seemed much more involved in the offense in this one as well. So good days here. On the other side of the ball with the Rams, like, what a disaster for the Rams. Obviously, they're already without Puka Nacua, and then they lose Cooper Kupp in this game. Guys, hopefully he was seen in a walking boot after the game. There was some talk that maybe he could have come back in, but they were down like 31-3, and so like whatever. So we'll see. But if Kupp has to miss any time, and as of this taping, we don't have any update on Cooper Kupp, but it'll be Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, maybe some Jordan Whittingham, who was Jordan Whittington, who was preseason star. Seems like they found him, the 5th-round rookie.
Yeah, I think what's also concerned with the Rams right now is their offensive line is decimated by injuries. So this is problematic, Jay, at the core, right? We could look at it, and we always do Stafford's there, and it's McVay, and, okay, Puka's hurt, now it's Cooper Kupp time, and you can lean on that. Now you're without your 2 best wide receivers, and we'll keep an eye on Kupp throughout the week. But at the core, the offensive line affects this offense all the way down, and they don't have that right now.
The issue is like, we've seen this story already. We saw it in 2022 where the offensive line just completely submarined the entire offense. And Stafford, as great of a quarterback as Stafford is, he's not the most mobile guy. Like, he's not someone who can get around a weak offensive line the same way that Lamar Jackson has been able to historically.
Listen to the schedule for the Rams coming up. Home to the Niners this week. Then they got to go to Chicago. That's a tough defense. Home to Green Bay. Home to the Raiders. Yep. Those are 4 solid defenses coming up.
In big trouble.
For the Rams. It doesn't get easier for LA and Sean McVay.
Our next game, a bit of a thriller here and an ugly game at times. The Bengals at Kansas City. But the news we have to start at the top before we even get into the stat line of this game, Matthew. Isiah Pacheco sounds like a broken fibula. He's going on IR. Obviously somebody who massive fantasy expectations going into the season, and now a backfield that doesn't seem like there's a clear answer after Pacheco.
Yeah, I mean, again, we'll see how the news sort of shakes out here. First off, just brutal blow. I have a ton of Isiah Pacheco. I'm a huge fan. He was, somebody that we talked up a lot in the preseason. I was much higher on him than consensus ranks. So just feel terrible for the kid, and hopefully it's only 4 weeks. It might be longer, right? But we know it's going to be at least 4 weeks. As we sit here today, I don't think we know. What I would say is that if I had to pick somebody right now, I think it's Samaje Perine, right? In terms of, he's the most complete running back that they have there as well. The early data in terms of what they've done, like through 2 games, like, Perine's played 12% of the snaps. Carson Steele has played 17. But Perine has run 21% of the routes, 10% for Carson Steele. It's all sort of like meaningless because, again, they have Pacheco, so it's just about filling in. Perine just got there. But to me, Samaje Perine is the most complete back. He's the better pass blocker. He's more experienced for a team that wants to obviously be pass heavy. He can catch the ball on 3rd down. Carson Steele, I feel like, had a bad fumble.
He did.
In this game against the Bengals as well. He's the undrafted rookie. I also wonder, by the way, if they're not done. Again, Clyde Edwards-Helaire currently on the IR himself. So do they go out and ask Jerick McKinnon to come back, who's currently a free agent? Obviously, there's familiarity there. Kareem Hunt's out there, right? And there's, from back in the day. Latavius Murray, Dalvin Cook's on the Cowboys practice squad. They could probably sign him if they wanted to. Melvin Gordon's out there. I think what they will do is I think it will be a little bit of a running back by committee. I think you'll see Carson Steele. And we saw it this last game as well when they get in close. Like they did a tackle-eligible play. They do such weird stuff at the goal line.
The Wanya Morris touchdown.
Right, exactly. I think that what the Chiefs will do, that they're not going to be able to replace Pacheco 1-for-1. There's not going to be some one player that walks into that massive role that Pacheco had. They will piece it together. It'll be a little bit by running back by committee. But my expectation as we sit here today, and we'll get into more of this tomorrow on the waiver wire show, Samaje Perine would be my target because I think he'll play the most snaps and he's going to have the most ways to earn fantasy points in that offense because he will play on third down and he'll probably split some of the early down work with Carson Steele.
Jay, in the actual game, not a good day for Mahomes despite the win. I mean, I believe this was the fewest passing yards he's had in a full game in his career. He finished at 151. Throws the 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 picks, another one called back. Just never really looked comfortable like we're used to seeing him.
This might be the worst I've seen Patrick Mahomes play. Statistically, it was bizarre. He was negative 0.2 EPA per play, which basically means that every time Patrick Mahomes was dropping back to pass, you were losing a fifth of a point, which is insane, after being so efficient against the Ravens. His average depth of target was 4 yards. Like, there was just nothing there. Against, by the way, a Bengals defense that has not covered itself in glory over the past year or so. So that's a terrible interception from Mahomes.
Three
the first
defenders
one.
around him.
I mean, the Cam Taylor-Britt one, what are you going to do? Odell Beckham. But still, he's throwing that into a tight window. So there are some questions. I think as well, the fact that the Ravens didn't look great against the Raiders also makes you put that week 1 performance into a bit more context.
Yeah.
And the fact now that, when Hollywood Brown was, basically ruled out for the year, everyone's like, oh, well, they've still got Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce. Well, that didn't look great last year. So that injury now takes on greater importance too, combined with Pacheco going down. So, look, it's still Patrick Mahomes. They're 2-0. They've beaten the Ravens and the Bengals. You can't complain too much. But I think there's some concerns about Mahomes' statistical ceiling now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Although I just don't know what to, I just don't know what you do, right? I mean, I'm not dropping Mahomes for Derek Carr or whatever,
Right.
but maybe what you could say here is Patrick Mahomes still a must-start, no-brainer? I don't look at the matchup. I don't think about it at all. And maybe I'm not ready to bail just yet, right? Especially given, they're playing on the road at Atlanta, who, that'll be a short week for the Falcons because they play tonight. So I want to see how he does in week 3 in a dome against the Falcons. But it's something to keep in mind. One last thing here. Tough game for Travis Kelce. 1 reception for 5 yards. But I want to give a shout-out to my guy, Ian Harditz, at fantasylife.com. He does his sheesh report every single week. And here's the thing. He was tackled inside the 1-yard line just before that tackle-eligible touchdown. So he easily could have had one, right, by the way. And he had a 41-yard catch and run called back based on a hold. It's worth noting he played 89% of the snaps in this game. He leads the team in both routes and red zone targets. So I get it. The production hasn't been there, but he's Travis freaking Kelce. I'm not panicking just yet. The whole passing offense was down in this game. I actually think Kelce's a buy. While I don't think Kelce is what he was, I think he's a buy low. He is better than what we've seen through 2 games.
Yep, I agree. Xavier Worthy did not do a great deal. I think that he's just going to be boom or bust every week,
Yes.
and if you need upside, then you can perhaps start him, but I wouldn't feel great about it. On the Bengals side.
But Rashee Rice locked in as a top 10
Yes.
fantasy wide receiver, especially with Pacheco now down. It's going to be even more pass heavy. And, Rashee Rice scores another touchdown. Just monster year coming.
Yep. On the Bengals side, I thought Joe Burrow looked better, Connor.
Yes, he did.
Physically, he looked much better.
Yeah, he just looked more comfortable week 1. Like you said, physically better. Not a big Ja'Marr Chase day. He catches 4 passes for 35 yards. But if you look at their upcoming schedule, there's reason to buy into Burrow, Chase, the entire Bengals offense. It's the Commanders. It's the Panthers.
It's the Commanders.
And then it's the Panthers.
Ja'Marr Chase, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns coming in. Andre Yoshevich, get him in there. Mike Gesicki is suddenly a thing.
Mike Gesicki is very much a thing in this
We'll
offense.
talk about Gesicki tomorrow on the waiver wire show, but very nice game for Mike Gesicki in this one as well. Hopefully T. Higgins gets back. Yoshevich has catches 2 touchdowns, but I'm telling you right now, Ja'Marr Chase on Monday Night Football next week is going nuclear against my Commanders.
Yeah, and then it's the Panthers, the Ravens who are shaky, and then the Giants. This is a really good stretch for the Bengals.
Buy
Do not
low.
panic
Buy
on
low
the
on
Bengals.
Buy low on Ja'Marr Chase, buy low on the Bengals. Who day?
All right, let's move over to our final
Who dey?
game of this block. Seattle at New England, an overtime game, deep into overtime. The Seahawks end up winning. DK Metcalf has the big day, catches 10 of 14 targets, 129 yards, and most notably, the touchdown on what looked like a busted coverage between, I believe, Christian Gonzalez and Kyle Duggar. So big day for Metcalf. I think more relevant, Matthew, is the big day for Jaxon Smith-Njigba because people were probably nervous after week 1. And he kind of shut all that up in week 2.
Well, I wasn't nervous because Jaxon Smith-Njigba killed me in a guillotine league. But yes, no, listen, we expected big things out of JSN coming into this year. Tyler Lockett banged up, and we thought this was going to be his year. And then a very quiet week 1, very, very frustrating. But in week 2. We saw it, right? 37% target share in week 2 and a 10.8 average depth of target, which was really nice given the fact that his average depth of target in week 1 was 3. So, like they were targeting more, much more different route tree, I thought, by the way. They played him in the slot a lot, which helped. 88% of his targets so far this year have come in the slot.
That's where he needs to be.
Right. And he looked the part. He looked like, oh, yeah, that's the guy from Ohio State that balled out. Yes, that's the guy we've been so excited about. Listen, the Patriots are a good defense, and I got to give credit to Gerard Mayo and that staff. Like, the Patriots are going to be a tough out this year.
They're playing hard.
They're playing really well. Like, they had to go to overtime. The Seahawks had to go to overtime, and I think the Seahawks have significantly more talent on their team than the Patriots. And again, the game was in Gillette, but still, like, good for the Patriots. Good for New England. Charbonnet. One of my shot for shots on Sunday morning was Zach Charbonnet would be a top 12 fantasy running back in place of Ken Walker. And as we head into Monday Night Football, he's the 8th best running back in football. So even if Bijan and Barkley have a good day, that one's going to cash. We like to see that as well. We'll update Walker's status, but it's good to know that if Walker were to miss another week, Charbonnet picks up right where he left off.
Just quickly, last thing on this one, Geno Smith dropped back 52 times in this game versus 14 running back carries for Charbonnet, 12% pass rate over expected. That would lead the league. So this offense, it wants to throw this offense,
Grubb.
which is great news for JSN.
Yeah, very Washington Ryan Grubb with Michael Penix, which is great in fantasy.
Which is great. And by the way, their upcoming schedule: Dolphins, Lions, Giants. You like that? Buy into the Seahawks, kids.
Some notable injuries we're tracking coming out of week 2 here. Of course, we talked about Cooper Kupp with the ankle, Justin Jefferson with the quad. Sounds like a contusion for him. Isiah Pacheco, much more serious, expected to go on IR. Joe Mixon dealing with an ankle. Evan Ingram was ruled out right before the game. Brutal with the hamstring injury. Tajay Spears had an ankle. Tank Bigsby came out of the game with a shoulder. Taysom Hill, more imaging going to happen for him with a chest injury. Pierre Strong Jr. with the hamstring as well.
But yeah, Jefferson and Kupp, obviously, those are the two big ones.
Jefferson downplayed it after the game. Kupp, we really need to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
More on these.
And Herbert, too. Herbert's been banged up in preseason, banged up last year, I feel. Yeah.
Every year. It's like 7 different things.
Yeah.
So, all right, dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, start, sit advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code SEASON20 for 20% off. Go to fantasylife.com/rotoworld to learn more. We're taking our first break. When we're back, we got Weekend Warriors, and of course, we got Sunday Scaries right after this.
Just him going at me that many times, it shows how much trust he has in me. Shows how much, trust his offense has in me. It's just moving on and continue to grow. I had a lot of targets in I think it was first week of Florida State. Last year, I had 18, so there's no biggie of me getting that many targets. I want those kind of many targets. It shows how much my offense cares about me to give me the ball in space. Let me do my what I'm able to do. So just having that many targets just shows how much the offense trusts me.
Weekend Warriors, that was Malik Nabers at the top. 18 targets, Matthew, 127 yards and a touchdown. He caught 10 of those 18 targets. It's not a surprise in this offense. He is going to be fed the ball nonstop.
We talked about this all through the people were like, Daniel Jones. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Volume and talent. He's going to get massive volume. He's insanely talented. Malik Nabers was a steal in drafts. He was never going as high as he should have been. This is going to be more the norm. Now, he's not always going to play my terrible Commanders, but again, he's going to be fed the ball. He's insanely talented. He was targeted on 67% of his routes. Just ridiculous video game numbers here, Connor.
Yeah, you love to see Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers in the top 3 of fantasy wide receivers in week 2 before Monday Night Football is played. Chris Godwin caught all 8 of his targets week 1. He gets 8 targets again, catches 7 of them, 117 yards and a touchdown. Baker Mayfield looking good.
Baker Mayfield looks great. This is the best stretch of his career, I think. And Chris Godwin, he's kind of from the Alvin Kamara school of a little bit younger than you think. He's only 28 years old, Chris Godwin, even though he's been around forever. He's had 22-plus fantasy points in both sides. He's the number 1 wide receiver by PFF grade so far this season. And I think in this offense, I don't think he's going to continue to put up 20 points every week, but it's sustainable that he can be a very viable starting option week in, week out.
Definitely, especially once he moved into the slot. There's no question about it. What's also exciting, by the way, he's got two touchdowns so far and 16 targets this year. He had 2 touchdowns all of last year.
J.K. Dobbins, Matthew, on his quest for maybe comeback player of the year at this point. 17 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown. he's been the guy in this Chargers rushing attack.
Well, we knew the Chargers were going to run the ball. We knew they wanted to run it with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. We didn't know which one of those guys it was going to be, and now we know the answer. It's J.K. Dobbins, and all due respect to Gus Edwards, we like Gus Edwards. But Dobbins looks explosive. Dobbins looks like the guy that was drafted those years ago out of Ohio State. Like, he's had at least 130 rushing yards and a touchdown in both games so far. He was basically free in drafts. Now, this is going to be a tough upcoming schedule because he's on the road at Pittsburgh, potentially with a backup quarterback. Again, we'll see the severity of Justin Herbert's injury. This will be his toughest test so far. It's one thing to beat up on the Panthers. Going on the road to Pittsburgh is another deal. But make no mistake, J.K. Dobbins is locked in as a RB2. Would love to see more passing game involvement. He's getting some, not a ton, but J.K. Dobbins, I don't want to say potential league winner, but massive value because he was basically free in drafts.
First Charger with 130-plus rushing yards in consecutive games since LaDainian Tomlinson. Pretty cool moment for J.K. Dobbins, who posted himself wearing, as a kid, an LT jersey. It's got to be amazing. J.K. Dobbins is one of the best stories through 2 weeks of the NFL. Everything he's been through, and then this was really the icing on the cake.
He really should. Someone you should think about for comeback player of the year. Instead of betting on the guys that lose like you do, you should. How about him?
Hey, Damar Hamlin's 16-1. He's charging up the overalls. Led the team in tackles on Thursday night.
You're back in.
He still has the trump card. Everyone, I came back from little knee, Achilles. Well, one bloke came back from the dead. Still the trump card.
No one cared last year. We don't know why. We're still wondering. We're still
one
trying to
cared.
solve this equation.
Yeah.
Well, another Charger here, Jay. Quentin Johnston caught 5 of 6 for 51 yards, 2 touchdowns for QJ. The Chargers are just finding ways to get guys going that nobody else, the previous regime could not figure out.
And by the way, again, this will never happen again. Me blowing so much smoke towards Jay Croucher.
That's all right. You just brought up Hamlin, so it's fine.
No, it's good. Good point. Yeah, I brought up all the money you lost in Damar Hamlin last year. So, but we did our desperation plays. Players available more than 80% of Yahoo leagues on Sunday's fantasy football pregame. Quentin Johnston was Jay Croucher's pick.
Big
by the way,
hat on that
by
one.
the way, George Savarikas picked Wan'Dale Robinson, who also scored, by the way. Pretty good run there. Anyway, nice job on QJ.
Thank you, Matthew. I think the thing with QJ is that you still have to regress a bit to the fact that it was, 16 months ago that he was picked 21 in the draft. And I understand that it didn't work out at all last year, but he's playing 70% of the snaps. He was targeted 31%. 31% target share yesterday. There is a chance that he could be Justin Herbert's #1 wide receiver. And I get that they're not throwing much, but they've been leading all throughout these games. There are going to be games where the Chargers have to throw. They're going to play the Chiefs twice in that division. So Quentin Johnston, he is still, I think, someone that you can believe in the upside. Wide receiver 11 on the week.
Josh Palmer a little bit banged up in this one, but through 2 weeks, he hasn't done much in this offense for sure.
Our last one on Weekend Warriors, Matthew, Jordan Mason, 20 carries, 100 yards, a touchdown. I mean, you said it. You just want whoever's starting at running back for the 49ers.
Yeah, over the weekend, we just got the brutal news about Christian McCaffrey. And, I don't know that there's much to say about Jordan Mason other than, as long as he's the lead running back of the San Francisco 49ers, he's a top 10 play. He's an RB1. He is a set it and forget it. You don't worry about it as well. He's averaging 25 touches and almost 20 fantasy points per game. You see it there on your screen, the production. And by the way, he looks the part. These aren't cheap touchdowns. He's not he looks the part of a bruising, true workhorse running back and a perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's scheme. The last thing I'll just say about Chris McCaffrey, we'll talk about this more on the waiver show tomorrow, but just, again, you need to start making some making some plans because it looks like you're going to be without CMC for at least 3 more weeks, and it might be longer as well. I would value McCaffrey as a I'm sorry. If I had McCaffrey, I would try to trade for Jordan Mason. I would value him as a top 20 player.
Yep.
I would even though it might only be 4 more weeks, but at that point your season's done.
Yep. Could be a lot long. Could be longer.
Yeah, could be longer. I would easily trade a top 20 overall player for Jordan Mason right now.
Feels like the Shanahan family will be doing this with running backs until the next ice age.
Yeah, right.
Going back all the way to the 90s. Sunday Scaries. This is always the brutal part of our Monday show. Michael Pittman, 8 targets, which looks good, Jay. Only caught 3 of them for 21 yards. And Michael Pittman's just allergic to the end zone, it feels like.
Wide receiver 57 on the day, 5.1 fantasy points. You don't like that. I mean, to me, this is, yes, it's Michael Pittman who's a Sunday Scary. This is a product of Anthony Richardson and the fact that we're getting more and more sample. He is just not accurate. under 50% completion percentage on the season. And the biggest problem with Richardson is that when he is in situations where teams know that he has to throw, he just has not been able to succeed in that. It is boom or bust. It's either run or throw it 50 yards down the field. And that's not really Michael Pittman's game. So I think it's going to get better. I believe in Shane Steichen, believe in the moldable clay of Anthony Richardson, but it's not looking good at the moment for Michael Pittman. I mean, you're going to have to bench him some weeks at this point.
Honestly, next 2 games, home to Chicago, home to Pittsburgh, 2 very good defenses. That's
brutal.
It's not great.
And when Josh Downs gets reintegrated in this offense, the target share might not stay as high as it's been.
Yeah.
That's so just more concerns for Pittman.
And Alec Pierce is going to be a thing. Right. I mean, had another nice game today. He's going to be enough of a thing that you have to be concerned if you have Pittman on your roster.
Amari Cooper, a similar stat line, Matthew, 8 targets, only caught 3 of them, 11 yards, just not much going.
Yeah, no, he isn't. I mean, again, the Browns won. I don't know that beating the Jaguars is that big of a feat these days, but Amari Cooper, if there's a positive to hang your hat on, he does have a 22% target share through 2 games, but Deshaun Watson has looked bad, right? He looked better in week 2 than he did in week 1, but he hasn't looked great.
The bar was low.
And by the way, Jerry Jeudy's going to be a thing. Like, he's going to – I don't know that you're going to want Jerry Jeudy on your fantasy team, but he's going to get enough work that it's going to take away from Amari Cooper in a game in which the Browns won and David Njoku was out. Amari Cooper should have had a better day than he did. He's caught, to your point, Connor, he's caught 29% of his targets, just 5 of 17. He's averaging under 4 fantasy points per game. It's just bad. 4.1 fantasy points. He's wide receiver 67 on the week going into Monday Night Football. It's been bad so far.
Jay, Matthew mentioned how poorly things are going for Jacksonville right now. Christian Kirk is being dragged down with that. A brutal fantasy day. 3 targets, 1 catch for -1 yard.
He has 2 catches through 2 weeks. So, I mean, he just can't be healthy. He was dealing with injuries in the offseason. I just assumed that he's not healthy and that it has to get better. But, I mean, at this point, I don't think you can start Christian Kirk until we see him look just physically right and have more than 1 catch in a game.
Other than Brian Thomas Jr. and Etienne, I don't know that there's a Jaguar you want. They're on the road to Buffalo next week, then they're at Houston. Like, yeesh. Let me see something.
Even Brian Thomas had 2 catches. It's just they were massive if you had 94 yards on the 2 catches. I believe in Brian Thomas more, but still, I don't feel good about anyone in this
offense. Looks brutal on this team right now.
Jaguars are 0-2, and they had 2 home games. And again, now they've got to go on the road at Buffalo and on the road at Houston. Very good chance they're 0-4, and massive changes coming to that organization. Like, Shad Khan is not going to be patient, I don't think, given how the Jaguars ended last season, the investment they made in Trevor Lawrence, and they start 0-4, I don't know.
Another organization just going nowhere, unfortunately, right now, the Panthers. It has not gone well for Bryce Young, and because of that, Matthew, it's not gone well for Diontae Johnson. He got 6 targets, only caught 3 of them, 15 yards. There seems to be a lot of frustration there. I don't think this will get better until there's a quarterback change.
You know what? I mean, they're at Las Vegas next week, which is a good defense, not a great defense. But honestly, you would feel a lot better about Diontae Johnson if Andy Dalton was under center. You just would at this point. It's unfortunate to say. But, the Diontae Johnson argument in the preseason, and he was somebody I advocated for, was just massive target share, and he's gotten that. 22% target share through 2 games, 6 targets in both games this year, technically 21.8%. But just honestly, Bryce Young's looked bad, and they're getting blown out of games, and so far no one else has stepped up to provide competition. Teams are just like, we're going to go double Diontae. It's awful.
A package deal for our last Sunday Scaries with the Lions here, Jay. Jared Goff, a lot of yards, but 2 picks, no touchdowns. Sam LaPorta, only 3 targets, 2 catches, 13 yards.
Don't understand what's happening with the Lions offense. Like, week 1, it's all Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, just an afterthought. Amon-Ra St. Brown gets 1 million targets yesterday, and then it's his offense all of a sudden. The biggest problem is Jared Goff has just been horrific so far. Both games, he's been terrible. These interceptions are awful. I don't know these final drives, I don't even understand what he's trying to do. On the season, he's 26th in EPA per play for quarterbacks. That is the same region as Deshaun Watson, Will Levis, and Bo Nix. That's how bad Jared Goff has been.
He's played 2 home games, and we spent so much of the offseason talking about how good he is in a dome, especially at home. He's averaging 10.1 fantasy points per game in 2 home games. Now they got to go to Arizona, which suddenly looks tougher, and then they're home to Seattle. By the way, and him being bad has hurt Sam LaPorta, who has just 8 total targets through 2 games. You still have to roll LaPorta out there, but if Jared Goff's your only quarterback, I think you got to start looking at the waiver wire and making some trades. I don't know that you can trust him until we see it. Again, it's been tough. He has not looked good.
No rest for the Birds. After playing the Eagles tonight, Kirk Cousins and the Falcons host Patrick Mahomes and the reigning champion Chiefs in prime time. Sunday, 7 Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Speaking of prime time, when we're back, last call, we got our Monday Night Football preview, including our best bets coming your way right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. It's time for last call. Let's take a look at the most bet Monday Night Football props on DraftKings right now. Saquon Barkley rushing yards at 80+ is plus 105. Bijan Robinson rushing yards 50+ is minus 320. Devontae Smith receptions over 5.5 minus 145. Devontae Smith receptions over 4.5 minus 140. Devontae Smith receiving yards 70+ minus 135. A very Smith-heavy board with A.J. Brown expected to be out for this game. Jay, do you have something for us on the Falcons side, though?
I do, Connor. My best bet, Bijan Robinson over 15.5 rushing attempts on DraftKings. Last week, he played 90% of the snaps. He got 18 carries. Tyler Algier only got 3. And here's the key thing. Falcons only had the ball for 24 minutes, and he was able to do that. So I think he is a workhorse back in this offense, and he's going to get over 15.5 carries.
Kind of piggybacking off of you, I'm going to take the under in this game because I think it's going to be very run-heavy on both sides of the ball. I think the Eagles are going to get Saquon Barkley heavily involved. I'm totally tailing you on Bijan Robinson's rushing attempts. I think this could be a grind-it-out kind of game, and 46. Not a real low number here, so we'll go with the under. Keep it simple.
I'm going to take Devontae Smith over 71.5 receiving yards for his career. When Devontae Smith sees at least 8 targets, he's averaging 83 yards per game. So again, no A.J. Brown in this game. Dallas Goedert's a little bit of an unknown. Jahan Dotson just got there. Jalen Hurts, when he's not hanging off to Barkley, he's going to be throwing to Devontae Smith. Give me the over 71.5 receiving yards for Devontae Smith, which public likes Devontae Smith, but not the line I do.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not a crazy line, considering he's the guy tonight.
Correct. It's closing time. You don't have to stay. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here for Jay and Connor. I'm Matthew. Alvin Kamara, drinks free. Good luck tonight with your Monday Night Miracle. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.